Hello everybody out in the VC, Matt here. Wanted to just check in and make a video, make a contest response, which this response is a little strange, a little out of the ordinary in that the contest is over, it's ended. The guy already gave the prize out the other day. The reason I wanted to do it all the same, even though it's after the fact, a couple of reasons. I thought it was a really cool, fun contest idea, so I wanted to weigh in with my thoughts on the subject. Second thing being that it's great to enter contests with a chance to win a prize and all that. That's fun stuff. But what I also really like about contests, especially if it's a novel idea or something neat or interesting, I love to watch other people's responses to see what they have to say on the subject. I like to make my own video too, but of course I already know what I'm going to say. So it's fun to see other people's responses, and I had fun doing that. Mainly, it's just like I said, I thought it was a neat idea for the contest. The guy's name is John the Old Millennial. That's his channel name, anyway. And I just heard about it. I actually saw, I can't remember who it was now, did a contest entry here a week and a half or so back. Thought that's a neat contest. It's a great contest. I want to weigh in. So I went and I checked John the Old Millennial channel out. He was doing a push for 100 subscriptions, so I guess he's fairly new to the VC. He's got a pretty neat channel. I looked around, watched some of his other videos, a lot of music talk, a lot of movie talk. And so this was his first contest. And like I said, it's already over. But if you're a little goofy like me, maybe you might want to make an entry anyway, just to weigh in with your thoughts on the topics at hand. And because that's what I'm doing, and just having a little fun with it. So the contest was focused on the year, your senior year of high school, the year you graduated high school. And it had 4 questions, and I just thought that was just a neat idea, because this is actually hard to believe, sadly, the 40th anniversary of my high school graduation. I graduated in 1982, and we'll get to the questions of the answers to those questions in a second. Really simple, straightforward contest. 4 questions. Name your favorite album of whatever year you graduated. Name your favorite song of that year, your favorite movie of that year. And the 4th question is to sort of share a memory of that year, whether that be a personal memory or whether that be sort of like a big world event, news event that happened that year. You know, I don't know, man lands on the moon, something like that. So 1982 and 1984 be the probably, well, not probably, they would be the 2 favorite best years of my life. So I could sit here and do a 24-hour video on my memories of 1982. I'm not going to put you all through that, but instead of answering that 4th question on its own, I'll sort of share some memories along the way as I'm answering the first 3 questions. And just so much, this year I graduated high school at May, started college that August. I remember David Letterman debuted. I remember just a great time in my life. Music was all over, and it was great. Just a lot of fun things happening. Met the girl of my dreams and the love of my life back then, which that went well for a time, and then unfortunately and ultimately didn't. But still great memories of that, and just all sorts of things going on. So first question being, what was your favorite album of the year you graduated? 1982 again in my case. And man, it's, we just had such an embarrassment of riches of great music back then in those days, the 60s, 70s, and the early 80s. And you just I guess we just took it for granted because we figured it'd never go away. Had no idea that comparing music now to then. But so it was, there's so much to pick from. There's so many great albums, and I just made a little bit of a list. Shoot Out the Lights, Richard and Linda Thompson. Imperial Bedroom, Elvis Costello. Tug of War, McCartney. Thriller, Michael Jackson. Rio, Duran Duran, of course. ABC's Lexicon of Love. Combat Rock by The Clash, American Fool by John Cougar Mellencamp. You couldn't escape Jack and Diane. That was all over the place in 1982. Of course, you got Come On Eileen and the great Tu-Rai album by Dexy's Midnight Runners. Berlin's Pleasure Victims. I actually saw them in a small club that year in 1982. The Metro and Sex, I'm a da-da-da-da-da, all that. That great songs, fun stuff. Sweets from a Stranger from Squeeze, Vacation Go-Go's. Name of this band is Talking Head. It's Heads. It's Hard by The Who. All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes by Pete Townsend. And you get the idea. I mean, I could go on and on. But my favorite album of that year happens to be my third favorite band of all time. And it's a band that I actually discovered that year. I'd heard about them previous to this because I read back in those days religiously Rolling Stone, Cream, Trouser Press, Musician, all of the rock and roll magazines. And so they would be talking about this year and previous years, a lot of articles on the punk rock new wave bands. The problem was punk rock, go back a few years from 1982, came around, or I heard about it, I don't know, late 76, early mid 77, somewhere in there. Of course, at this time I'm 12, 13 years old or whatever. Hear about these bands, I'm interested in them, but they don't play them on the radio. Why they didn't, I have no idea, because they were still playing new rock and roll band, like the arena rock, however you want to characterize the classification there. They're still playing those bands on the radio, the new ones, as well as the old ones, because radio had not yet calcified into that stupid classic rock format yet, and so they were still playing new music. But for whatever reason, they weren't playing the Sex Pistols and the Clash and stuff like this. Well, I was interested and curious about what they sounded like, wanted to hear them. But again, you know, I'm 13, 14 years old. I don't have a lot of money. I'm going to the record store all the time, a couple of times a week at least, seeing these albums in there, and I'm buying albums with what little money I have because I'm not old enough to have a job yet and all that. So just whatever money my parents throw my way every once in a while, or I mow some lawns and earn a little money. So, you know, I'm pretty much playing it safe and buying the, filling in the gaps in my Beatles, solo Beatles, Rolling Stones, Who, bands that I already know, because, you know, $6, $7 is a big investment when you're 13, 14 years old in an album. And if you buy one of these bands that you, the Buzzcocks or the Ramones or whatever, that you've heard about but not heard, and the album stinks, then you just wasted a lot of money. So by and by, slowly, I finally did take a chance. I bought London Calling by The Clash. Great album, one of my probably best album of the 70s in my opinion. Of course, there's that, is it 70s or 80s because of the double release date. But and then radio sort of started playing what we called punk or new wave in those days a little bit. The Pretenders, the Police, the Go-Go's, you know, things like that, but still not a lot of bands that still just didn't get played. And why American radio didn't play them, and maybe they did in New York and California, Chicago, places like that, but they certainly did in Fort Worth, Texas. Why they didn't, I don't know. Why does classic rock radio not play the newer albums by McCartney, Neil Young, and The Who nowadays and mix it in with the old stuff? I have no idea. They got their head up their ass. I don't know the answer. So in the summer of 1982, a whole lot of great and wonderful and memorable things happened in my life anyway. But one of them was, there was a radio station in Dallas, Fort Worth, 97.1 FM, KEGL. They call it the Eagle. And it'd been around, I don't know, since early 70s or so. It was a terrible radio station. We used to make fun of it. We used to call it the Kegel instead of the Eagle. And it was just, it was like the radio station that, you know, your parents would listen to. They played just sort of the namby-pamby, soft rock, yacht rock, soccer mom music, which I don't think soccer mom was really a term yet back then, but Barry Manilow, Torn Between Two Lovers, Muskrat Love, and they play Elton John, but not the good Elton John. They play like the Don't Go Breaking My Heart and Island Girl type Elton John, not the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road stuff. And just mushy, you know. The two good rock stations back in those days were KZEW, the Zoo, and Q102. But the Kegel, that was for, like boring 30-year-old moms and just crap. But I don't know if the station sold or somebody there decided to change things up. For whatever reason, in the summer of '82, they decided to go all new wave punk rock. And so they did. And this was also about the time with MTV. MTV came out in 1981. Thing is, cable TV in Fort Worth was coming in, but it didn't come in overnight. They had to, I guess, physically put the cables up with the phone lines across the whole city. And so it took like a year and a half to get the whole city covered. I remember a buddy of mine, Hal, he had cable TV like about a year before it came to our neighborhood. And then my girlfriend at the time, her neighborhood didn't get it till about half a year later. But anyway, MTV, and as awful and terrible as MTV became pretty quick, thank God for it, because originally it was novel, it was exciting, it was new, it was fun, it was actually good and great. And the great thing that MTV did, about the only great thing they ever did, was they did play, Duran Duran and Culture Club and the Clash and the Talking Heads and stuff that radio stations, again, I have no idea why, but they weren't playing them. Well, the kids saw these bands on MTV. They started calling up their local radio stations, and after a million kids called them, the radio stations finally said, well, I guess we're going to have to start playing this stuff. But they played some new wave punk music, and others just never did get played too much outside of like a college radio station or something. But KEGL, that summer of '82, they went with this all new wave punk format. Sadly, it only lasted about 5 months or so, but it lasted through the summer of '82. So all of a sudden, all these bands that I'd been reading about in Trouser Press and Cream, and that I'd heard about and seen the records in the record store but never heard, the Squeeze, the Buzzcocks, the Ramones. I'd heard a couple of Ramones songs, but not many. Kate Bush, and just all sorts of this great music. And it was just a wonder. And by this time I had a job. I was working at a movie theater, so I had a little bit of money, so I could actually go out and buy these albums. Well, one of the bands that I heard about, that I'd actually, even before that radio station went to that format, I'd thought about buying their albums, but just hadn't got around to it. But they played a song called Town Called Malice several times by The Jam, and just fell in love with the song. And they also played another one of their songs that I really liked. So I was like, man, I got to go out and buy this, got to find this Town Called Malice album. So I went to the record store, and all of a sudden I went blank on what was the title of the song. And I couldn't remember for the life of me. But I saw this album, and I saw it had this song called Start, and I remembered reading, and this album actually came out in 1980. Remembered reading that it sort of sounded like Taxman in a Trouser Press review of the album that at the time it came out. So I thought, okay, I'll get that. I bought this album, and I remember I bought this, it was probably about 3 or 4 o'clock that day. Went home, put the album on, and I think I was still sitting in my room by my stereo probably at 11 o'clock that night, just playing over and over and over. My third favorite album of all time, and just fell in love with it instantly. And that's the wonder and the magic of being young, and the wonder of the magic of living in a time when there actually is great and wonderful music coming out. Just, I don't know if you remember that. And this isn't the only album this has ever happened to me with. Other albums have done this, where you get an album and you just fall head over heels in love with it, and just totally blown away and engrossed in it, and you spend a month just playing this album only, that album only, and just how fun and great and wonderful that felt. Anyway, but this was 1980. This does not have Town Called Malice on it, which I quickly figured out. Didn't take me long to remember the song name. And so this was their album that had just come out. This came out in 1982. This was their last studio album. So I got this. I had the other sound effects. So now I'm in love with the Jam. And so I went out and got their other albums by and by pretty quick. I was really excited. I was hoping that, because this album was new at the time, hoping they would tour. I found out way later, internet days, that they actually had played Dallas back in, I think, 78 and 80. Of course, I'd heard of them, but I didn't know anything about them, and I didn't have any idea they were in town anyway. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't have gone. Kick myself now for not having figured them out sooner, so I could have seen them live. But I was hoping they would do a tour and would come to town. I could go see them. A lot of great bands. There was a place called the Bronco Bowl, which was actually a bowling alley with a little concert hall connected to it. That was old as dirt. The place was, and the concert hall held about maybe 1,000 seats. So it was a great place to see a band. I got to see a bunch of people there: the Clash, the Pretenders, Johnny Rotten, Stray Cats, just a ton of bands. And they actually had the original MTV VJs. I guess they would send them around the country, but a lot of times they would be there to introduce the band. Saw a lot of bands. Anyway, I was hoping the Jam would come by, and then one day I saw on MTV news that Paul Weller announces that the Jam are going to break up, and they're only going to do a tour of England and Europe and then break up. I was like, son of a bitch. So I never did get to see the Jam, and they of course never did a reunion tour or album or anything. And I never got to see Paul Weller because he pretty much only plays over in England and Europe, and occasionally he'll come to the US and do a couple of concerts in LA or New York, but he doesn't really tour over here. So unfortunately I'll probably never get to see him. But just, this was a great album too. The other good thing about 1982 though was this was the Jam's final studio album, but they released this, and I saw this video on MTV a few times. The Bitterest Pill I Ever Had to Swallow. This EP with 5 songs, so you get that. Everything on there is great too. They released this other EP, Beat Surrender. This was a #1 song for them in England. Town Called Malice was #1 in England too. This has got 5 songs too, some originals, some covers, all great stuff. They released a live album. I think this is the 82 tour, and they got this out towards the end of the year, Dig the New Breed. So you got 2 albums and 2 EPs from the Jam in 1982. And it really would have behooved them, I think, to have stuck together for another year or so, because Town Called Malice did get quite a bit of airplay on MTV, as I remember, and Bitterest Pill got a good amount. And then when they broke up and they were gone, MTV moved on to other bands and kind of stopped paying attention to them. But if they would have stuck together for a year or 2 more, I think they would have got a lot of MTV play, and they would have got bigger in America than they were. And it's a shame that they're not, because they're such a great band. And I've said this a million times, but if you like old 60s music, Beatles, Kinks, Small Faces, that sort of stuff, if you like punk and new wave, you got to check out the Jam. Chances are you're going to love them. And they've got their own sound. They're not imitators of those other bands, but there's some elements of that stuff in there, and just a wonderful band. So yeah, best album of the year for me is going to be The Gift by the Jam. And just great memories of playing that, and great memories of discovering that band that year. It is so cool when you really discover a band that, even if you'd heard about them before, but that you finally tune into them and really pay attention to them. So best song of the year is the second question. Again, just so much to choose from. Vacation by the Go-Go's, 8675309. Come On Eileen. Look of Love by ABC. Athena by The Who. Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash and Rock the Casbah. Far from the band's best songs, but still great songs and just great memories of cruising around Camp Bowie in Fort Worth with Pat and Joe and John Paul, and we're driving around hoping some carload of chicks passes by or something, drinking beer, and Should I Stay or Should I Go is blasting on the radio, and all these other great songs in 1982, and we're singing along and having a good old time. I'll Stop the World and Melt with You, to Commissar, Destination Unknown, by Missing Persons, She Blinded Me with Science. We had a ton of fun with that song, and that's a great song. Don't You Want Me Baby, Goodbye to You by Scandal. Tons and tons and tons of songs. And Town Called Malice would be up there with my favorite. But I came down to two choices. Another great 1982 album, Little Red Corvette, one of my favorite Prince songs. I think that's my favorite song on this album. That's just chock full of great songs. But that's a great fun one. The other one, this is sort of Bruce Springsteen trying to be Bob Dylan, just him with a tape recorder and a guitar pretty much. And I think he recorded this thing in his kitchen or bedroom or something. But Atlantic City, just an incredible song. Everything Dies, maybe that's a fact. Maybe everything that dies someday comes back. And just a great album, but that's the best song on this album. So I can't really choose between Little Red Corvette and Atlantic City. And then there's just so many other, Ballroom Dancing, Tug of War. That was a great album from that year from McCartney. So, but I'm going to declare it a tie between Atlantic City and Little Red Corvette. Favorite movie of the year, a lot of great movies in 1982, and this was when you still had real movies in the theater, and nowadays if something looks like a good movie, it's playing at the Art House in Dallas, and you got to drive 30 miles to see it, or just wait till it comes out on Netflix or whatever, by and large, because most of the movie theaters, and back then you had like single, double screen, 4 screens. You had 1 6-screen theater in town out of the 12 or so movie theaters. Now every movie theater's got 20 screens, and 19 of them are whatever the damn superhero movie of the week is, or the Pixar Disney kids crap movie of the week is. And but back then you had actual real movies in movie theaters. And so, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, World According to Garp, The Verdict with Paul Newman, 48 Hours, Eddie Murphy, first movie there, Officer and a Gentleman, The King of Comedy was a great one with De Niro and Jerry Lewis, The Thing, Fitzcarraldo, Cat People, not anywhere near as good as the original Cat People movie, but had Natasha Kinski in there when never mind, when she was hot. Blade Runner, Tootsie. The girl got really mad at me about that movie, but that's another story for another time. Sophie's Choice, Fanny and Alexander, my favorite year. Tons of great movies. Well, this is also when the newspapers actually had a staff and people actually read them. And nowadays, newspaper, the entertainment section every week, it used to be about that thick. Now it's about that thick, and it's recipes for cookies and cakes. Back in the day, it was book reviews, play reviews, movie reviews, music reviews, and you had people on staff that worked at that individual newspaper writing those reviews. Now in the newspaper will have an occasional movie review, but it's some canned AP copy from somebody out in New York or something instead of a local person. So back then we had Elston Brooks and Perry Ellis, and they were the critics for the movies. And then we had like I said, the theater and the book review and the music review people. And also used to have, which I miss, you'd have the ads for all the movies that were out playing at that time, and then you'd also have the ads for the individual movie theaters, Seminary South, Opera House, Ridgely, Western Hills 4, Wedgwood, all of that, and they'd have their location and phone number, and they'd have the movies that they were playing and the times of the movies, and you don't get that anymore. But one day I come home from school, and I think it was fall, I don't remember exactly, it was cold, My dad had made a thing of beef stew. It's good, so I'm eating beef stew, sitting down reading the newspaper, and I see a movie review for this film from Elston Brooks. And I'd never heard of the movie. Sounds really interesting, and because those are still the days when movies didn't have all the hype like they do now. And some movies did, but mostly they didn't. So, and it was a movie about the early 60s, which always interested me because I've always been a lifelong Beatles and Bond and Doctor Who and everything English and 60s and stuff like that. So, this doesn't have anything to do with England, but movie sounded interesting, and I looked at the Opera House ad, noticed the movie was starting in about 30 or 40 minutes, the next showing, so I didn't have anything to do. I jumped in the car and went and saw it, and Diner, just really great movie. Sort of reminiscent somewhat of American Graffiti from the decade before. Of course, that was high school kids. These are sort of kids in their early 20s, starting to figure out life and all. But just a nice, quiet, touching, hilarious little movie, and just really enjoyed it. I actually went back the next day because I went and saw it by myself. I told my buddy John about it, and he thought it was interesting, so we went back the next day and saw it, and he really liked it. But yeah, and this is in my top 10 movies of all time, I think, would probably be, and just a great movie. So yeah, 1982 was a wonderful time to be alive. I wish I was still there instead of here. That's my entry. And like I said, hope you enjoy the video, Jason. Sorry I missed the contest, but I just thought you had a great idea for a contest, so I wanted to weigh in. Anybody else wants to weigh in, feel free to, even though the prize has been given. So, yep, take care.